Welcome to the second episode of my Wellness Breathing Stretching channel. In this episode, I'll talk about using extended exhalation breathing while practicing yoga. In episode 1 of this podcast, I presented a general introduction to the extended exhalation breathing technique as a standalone practice and as done with walking and running. In this episode, I will just summarize it briefly, but if you are in doubt about its rationale or about some details of this technique, you're welcome to listen to episode 1 in full. So how do we do extended exhalation breathing? We start by taking a deep, satisfying inhalation through our nose. Then we slowly exhale again through our nose. During the exhalation, we count in our head the length of our exhalation. Say it was 6. We repeat this pattern of deep inhalation and long exhalation several times. When we're comfortable enough with the count of 6, we may increase exhalation to 8, doing this again for a couple of minutes. And if we're still fine with it, we can now add a short suspension of breath at the end of the exhalation, say to the count of 2. As we get better at it, we lengthen both the exhalation and the suspension. A typical breathing session may last some 10 minutes. In fact, you may think of it as a form of breathing meditation. Suspending your breath might seem scary at first, but most people reach quite long suspensions in just a few weeks. In episode 1, I also talked about extended exhalation breathing during walks and runs. Now it's time to combine it with yoga. Let's first look at the way breathing is traditionally combined with yoga. Most schools of yoga use breathing in their yoga routines, either in a separate section of the class called pranayama, or as accompanying the actual practice of postures. Let's leave aside the special pranayama sessions and concentrate here on breathing that synchronizes with our movements into postures. I'll divide yoga postures into 3 major types. 1. Sequential postures, such as sun salutation or moon salutation. 2. Twin postures, such as cat-cow or bidirectional head movements. 3. Postures with a long stay, such as twists, forward bends, inverted postures, standing postures, and many yoga therapy postures. I start with sequential postures. Sun salutation is a typical example of a structured sequence of postures. In sun salutation, each movement into the next posture is accompanied by a regular alternation of inhalation and exhalation. Inhalation usually goes with an outward opening movement of the body, while exhalation goes with retreating inwards. Usually these movements are rhythmical, so inhalation and exhalation last the same length of time. This breathing pattern clearly contradicts extended exhalation breathing. Twin postures are our second category. The cat-cow alternation is a good example of twin postures. We get on our hands and knees, and then we move our back from a concave, that is curved down position, to a convex, that is curved up position. This can also be done while bending forward from a standing posture, holding our thighs or ankles with our hands. In the traditional practice, we follow the principle that inhalation goes with outward opening of the body and exhalation with retreating inwards. So we inhale when our back sinks down and exhale when it rises up. These movements are rhythmical, so inhalation and exhalation last the same length of time. This breathing pattern also contradicts extended exhalation breathing. We now get to postures with a long stay. Taking twists as our example of a posture with a long stay, when we perform a twist, we usually first inhale and then we slowly exhale while getting into the twist. In this case, exhalation is much longer than inhalation. At some point, your yoga teacher may say, after the exhalation, just continue with your regular breathing or with shallow breathing for the rest of the twist. This practice is more similar to extended exhalation breathing in that it uses a long exhalation. However, its closure is different, since in traditional yoga practice we go into regular or shallow breathing after the exhalation, not into suspension of breath. It is time then for us now to find out how we can adapt extended exhalation breathing to our yoga practice. We start with a more similar case, namely postures with a long stay. Using our extended exhalation breathing technique, we do not conclude the posture with regular or shallow breathing. Instead, we follow our exhalation with a suspension of breath. You may wonder, what if we want to stay longer in the twist? Well, in this case, we loosen up our twist just enough to allow our breathing muscles free motion in taking a new deep inhalation, and then we once again repeat extended exhalation followed by suspension. To rephrase the difference, we may say that in the traditional practice of yoga, our basic time unit is the time we decide to stay in the posture, and when we run out of breath, we resort to regular or shallow breathing. With extended exhalation breathing, I suggest that our basic measuring unit is the time it takes us to complete one extended exhalation breathing cycle. The length of our stay in the posture is then a product of the number of times we repeat our breathing cycle of extended exhalation plus suspension of breath. We do this for twists, forward bends, headstands, standing postures, in other words, any posture with a prolonged stay. Let's look now at twin postures. We look again at the cat-cow alternation. Here we can incorporate extended exhalation breathing into our yoga practice in two ways. One way is to take our deep inhalation with a neutral straight back. From it, we may move to a concave cow position, accompanying this with exhalation plus suspension of breath. Then we return to a neutral back, we take a deep inhalation again, and we go into a convex cat position, again accompanying this movement with exhalation plus suspension of breath. This double set of movements may be repeated several times. Note that this practice runs counter to the principle that inhalation goes with outward opening and exhalation with retreating inwards. However, I find this principle problematic in any event, since in extreme backward stretches, we had better have our chest muscles relaxed rather than tense. Another way to incorporate extended exhalation breathing into twin postures is to start our inhalation as before with a neutral back, and then to go through several cat-cow alternations with one long exhalation plus suspension. The cycle of cat-cow alternations may, of course, be repeated, starting each repetition with a neutral back inhalation. Sequential postures are our third category. As I said above, in sequential postures, such as sun salutation, we traditionally inhale and exhale with each movement from posture to posture. One way of adapting sun salutation to extended exhalation breathing is to extend our stay in postures associated with retreating inwards for the duration of exhalation plus suspension. This solution might, however, significantly slow down our cycle of the sequence and may beat the purpose of using sun salutations as a warm-up sequence performed several times at the beginning of a yoga session. Another way to adapt extended exhalation breathing to sequential postures is by packing several movements under one exhalation. Let's take the first 4 movements in sun salutation as an example. In traditional performance, we would stand in initial standing position, taking an inhalation, bring our hands palm to palm against our chest with an exhalation, raise our hands up and backwards with an inhalation, and bend forward to the floor with an exhalation, doing all this in a rhythmical pace. Alternatively now, we can get into initial standing position taking a deep inhalation, and then go through the other 3 postures in sync with a single long extended exhalation plus suspension. The forward bend is a wonderful place to be in suspension of breath. This way, we go through the sun salutation sequence by grouping its single movements into sections in harmony with our breathing pattern. As a yoga teacher or as an individual yoga practitioner, I invite you to venture into the extended exhalation breathing technique. In your teaching or in your individual practice, you may apply it first as a standalone meditation in order to get used to it. Then you may integrate breathing with posture as suggested in this episode. I hope you try out, enjoy, and embrace this way of integrating breathing with yoga. I'll be very glad to hear from you about your experience with the extended exhalation breathing technique. You can leave a comment on my Wellness Breathing Stretching podcast channel. You may also spread the word by sharing my podcast channel with friends and colleagues. One way of hearing about my forthcoming episodes is to check the follow or subscribe button on your podcast application. So long, and see you again on future episodes.